Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and alongside Sophie Grégoire Trudeau as they left last night, leaving Ottawa for Buenos Aires and the G20 summit, due to arrive this hour, as a matter of fact. The Prime Minister says that Ottawa and Washington are still in discussions, the government's words, over the new United States-Mexico-Canada agreement, specifically where and when they're going to sign on the dotted line. That was supposed to happen on the sidelines. A little bit of confusion, a little bit of murkiness over all of this. So let's turn to David Cochran, who's in Ottawa, with more on the story. We were looking there just before we went to you, David, at David McNaughton, who is the Canada's ambassador to the United States. He's not even going to be there because there's not going to be the big festive signing ceremony that we've seen in past signings of this nature.
Yeah, David McNaughton, I think, joked earlier to Politico, which is an online U.S. News organization, that maybe the person to sign this agreement would be a low-level Canadian official with a paper bag over their head. I think that's kind of the way the talks and the negotiations went. I think McNaughton is not going largely because the steel and aluminum tariffs issues is not necessarily on the agenda, and it really is an open question whether new NAFTA, USMCA, whatever you want to call it, is going to be signed. It's still a little bit uncertain right now. It's not that the deal is falling apart. It's just whether a ceremonial signing event will happen at this, because really the first we heard 100% it was going to happen was from Donald Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, said it was going to happen on Friday. And since then, Canada has said nothing nearly as certain, saying they're still finalizing some of the language. There was language posted online by the U.S. trade authorities that Canada looked at and said, wait a minute, that's not what we agreed to. This is just 2 days ago. So there's a final legal scrub still happening of all of the documents. And right now, Canadian officials will not say with 100% certainty that the new trade agreement, that there will be an official signing ceremony when the leaders gather in Buenos Aires.
So the Prime Minister, as I mentioned, David, set to arrive there later this morning. We'll look for pictures of that arrival. We will await departure images as well of Donald Trump leaving Washington to join them there in Argentina. And, you know, we have certainly seen in the past few summits Donald Trump at the center of, well, pretty much international chaos. What are we expecting there?
Yeah, it's been a bad year for big summits, hasn't it? I mean, you go back to the G7, which Canada hosted in Charlevoix, Quebec. That ended with Trump flying away on Air Force One in a tirade of tweets and threats, lashing out at Prime Minister Trudeau, calling him weak. At the APEC summit recently in Papua New Guinea, there was no consensus amongst the countries gathered there, largely because of a flare-up in trade tensions between the U.S. and China. I mean, those two countries are about 4 or 5 weeks away, January 1st, from the U.S. slapping tariffs on $250 billion worth of Chinese goods, which will obviously have a significant ripple effect for the global economy. So there's a lot of anxiety over that, what kind of a showdown is going to happen between Trump and China at the G20. The other big distraction, Heather, is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia is there. Mohammed bin Salman, he arrived a couple of days ago. He showed up early, widely believed to have played a direct and significant role in the murder of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, something he obviously denies. But his mere presence at this summit is going to be a distraction and a possible flashpoint. Normally, leaders scramble to have one-on-one bilateral meetings. I don't know if a lot of people are going to be scrambling to have one-on-one private meetings with MBS, as he is known. Canada is still trying to figure out how it's going to respond in terms of sanctions or retaliation against Saudi Arabia for what happened to Khashoggi. So there is the official agenda to talk about cooperation and working together, but these sideshows that are going to happen because of the diplomatic interplay between the nations, that's probably going to be the real story of the G20 in Argentina.
And the Russia-Ukraine issue, again, that's also there with Putin in attendance. So you're quite right. We don't always pay extremely close attention to G2 meetings, but I think we will, because there are major international storylines all playing out there over these next few days.
Yeah, and Trump is going to have a one-on-one with Putin, and we know that always makes news.
I know you'll be watching it all for us, David. Thank you. We'll be back to talk more about this later this morning.